Daily Wire reports President Donald Trump signed an executive order Wednesday banning men from women's sports, a historic moment in the fight to protect the integrity of women's spaces from gender activists and ideologues. From now on, he said women's sports will be only for women. The president signed the order in the East Room of the White House, surrounded by young schoolgirls, female athletes, and advocates, including Independent Women's Forum ambassadors Riley Gaines, Paula Scanlon, and Peyton Edwards. It is reading from the executive order, it's the policy of the United States to rescind all funds from educational programs that deprive women and girls of fair athletic opportunities, which results in the endangerment, humiliation, and silencing of women and girls and deprives them of privacy. It shall also be the policy of the United States to oppose male competitive participation in women's sports more broadly as a matter of safety, fairness, dignity, and truth. So he's signed the executive order. We have a quick clip from the event. Let's see it.
This was one of the big reasons that we all won, and it's one of the big reasons that we had a record, a landslide like they haven't seen before, very often anyway. And who could forget last year's Paris Olympics, where a male boxer stole the women's gold medal after brutalizing his female opponent so viciously that she had to forfeit just after 46 seconds, and she was a championship fighter. And actually, they had two women or two people that transitioned, and both of them won gold medals, and they won them very convincingly. But all of that ends today because with this executive order, the war on women's sports is over.
So he says the war in women's sports is over, and it could be. I mean, this could be essentially the end of the issue. It really depends on what the left decides to do next. This is a major victory one way or another, but it remains to be seen how the left's going to respond to this, because they've lost the battle completely. They've lost politically. They've lost culturally. Everyone is against them. Public opinion is very much against them. The question is whether they want to keep falling on the sword in a desperate attempt to pull the culture back towards allowing men in women's sports again, which would be a fool's errand. But I think it remains to be seen whether the left decides to do that. And I think right now they don't know what to do. And I also think they probably won't try to do that. Because let's say a Democrat wins, God forbid, in 2028, the Democrat president could sign an executive order just overturning what Trump just did. And it's hard to predict what will happen 4 years from now. But as it stands right now, I wouldn't see that happening, because it would be an extremely politically unpopular thing to do. And what you have to remember about this issue and the trans issue generally is that almost nobody on the left ever believed in any of it. Almost none of them actually thought it was right or fair or made any sense to have dudes compete against women. They took this position cynically because for a very brief moment in time, like kind of a blip on the screen, but for a brief moment in time, the trans rights, quote unquote, movement seemed to have the cultural upper hand. And so for a very brief moment, it seemed like the more popular position, the safer bet. And so they decided to ride that horse. Now, if the left had the foresight to see this moment coming, Donald Trump flanked by smiling female athletes, signing an executive order banning men from women's sports with the wide approval of the public. I mean, if they could have seen that, they never would have embraced this position to begin with. And please don't think I'm giving the left any credit here. I mean, precisely the opposite. My point is that most of them knew better. Most of them knew that the trans rights stuff was ridiculous the whole time. The trans agenda was always something that almost nobody truly believed in. How could they? It's objectively, plainly, egregiously wrong in every way, morally and scientifically. This was a political play by the left, and it backfired in historic fashion. You know, if you rewind the clock back to 2017, let's say, and everything plays out the same since 2017, except the left never leans into the trans stuff or tries to shove it down our throats. If it had played out that way, then I think a Democrat probably is in office right now. That's how badly this whole thing has backfired on them. So, as always, you got to remain vigilant, and you never know what will happen next. And now you can't. Now there's a lot of the trans activists are fully bought in, and they're getting more and more desperate and more angry and panicked. And so you have to worry about that. There's no telling what they're going to do. We also know that there's an established history of violence among trans activists, so that also becomes a concern. That, I think, is a major concern right now. When they start lashing out violently even more. And then the other thing, too, as we talked about a couple days ago, is that you have to keep in mind that, I mean, one of the reasons why the trans ideology caught on so much, particularly in high levels of government, in media, Hollywood, big tech, it was a political ploy, like we just discussed. That's true. But then the other part of it is that for a lot of the people in positions of power, it's personal for them. Like their kids. You know, they transitioned their own kids. And for those people, we talked about this a couple days ago, they can't just let it go. They can never let it go. Because to let it go would be to admit to themselves and to the world what they did to their own kids, and so they can never let that go. So that's another factor here, which means that even as the culture moves past trans ideology, there's going to be this core of people, some of whom are powerful, who can never move on from it. And the more that everyone else moves on from it, the angrier, more desperate they get. So how does that play out in the next few years? Well, we're going to find out. Now, staying on this topic for a moment, I thought this was funny. Here's a tweet from ESPN about this. The tweet says, President Donald Trump will sign an executive order Wednesday designed to prevent people who were biologically assigned male at birth from participating in women's or girls' sporting events. Now, it may not look like it, but this tweet actually signifies, I think, a major capitulation by ESPN, because by their uber woke standards, like this might as well be them endorsing Donald Trump. The phrase biologically assigned male at birth. Biologically. The woke thing, the orthodox thing on the left, obviously, is to say assigned male at birth, which makes no sense, for reasons we all know now. You're not assigned anything, least of all at birth. Your sex is not assigned or decided at birth. It is noted or noticed or recorded at birth, although actually it usually is noticed and noted and recorded before birth. But that's the woke way of putting it, is assigned male at birth. ESPN, though, has tried to split the baby here because the two ways of phrasing it. There's the correct way, which is to say that Trump has banned biological males from women's sports. Now, yeah, biological male is redundant, but it at least makes sense. You don't need to add male is a biological category. You don't need to add biological male, but it's not a nonsensical phrase. So that's the correct way of putting it. The other way to phrase it is the woke, nonsensical, assigned male at birth. ESPN has tried to combine them. And so they've said biologically assigned male at birth. And this is their attempt to compromise. But they've ended up with a phrase that makes even less sense. This is the most nonsensical way of phrasing it you could possibly come up with. Biologically assigned male at birth. Now, biologically assigned male maybe sort of makes sense because I guess you could say biology assigns our sex. That's a weird way of putting it. Not necessarily wrong, I guess. But then they added at birth, as if biology doesn't decide if we're male or female until we emerge from the birth canal. So if you heard the phrase biologically assigned male birth and you didn't know any better, you would think that it means that like the moment the baby emerges from the birth canal, their sex takes shape in that moment, like this mystical moment of transformation. And that's the way, that's the way that they have presented it in their attempt to compromise ever so slightly. And but it makes even less sense because there is no, when you have something that makes sense and something that's nonsensical, any attempt to compromise between sensible and nonsensical, you just end up with something that's nonsensical. That's the problem. Hey, YouTube, thanks for listening to the show. If you'd like access to my full show with no ads, you should go to dailywire.com and use promo code Walsh to get 2 months free on all annual plans. See you there.